Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Healing the Patriarchy with Love podcast, the show that creates a kinder world by celebrating solutions to patriarchy. I'm your host, Luna, and I'm both excited and honoured to be joined by Louise and Dan Aldred, who are what I would call revolutionaries. They have co-authored a book together called Embodied Education, creating safe space for learning, facilitating and sharing. They've kindly joined us today to talk about this pioneering book. Hey and Dan, welcome to the show. It's lovely to have you here with us.
Hi.
Really happy to be here.
Hi, it's lovely to have you here. Thank you so much for allowing me to talk to you and to get some more information for everybody. So can you maybe, I've obviously just given the title of the book, but I haven't really given away fully what it's about. Could you maybe just give the listeners a kind of a
I'm gonna have to say, Luna, you're completely breaking up, so we can only hear a little bit of your speech. I don't know how we are with you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, it sounds okay to me, but I'm sorry if it is breaking up. It could be my internet here because it is pretty sporadic. So yeah. I'll just say it again. I just welcomed you to the show, and then I just said, given that sort of the title of the book, which I'll just read again in case if I broke up maybe. So the title of the book is Embodied Education, creating safe space for learning, for considering. So I just shared that title with the listeners, and I just wondered if you would be able to give a bit more high level detail about the book.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So, well, the book has quite a wide audience, but the main aim of it is to catalyze a shift in culture within all spaces where education, facilitation or sharing take place. So the aim of it is to catalyze an educational paradigm which is based on well-being, co-regulation and creativity. And primarily, we're setting that in motion through raising awareness and asking questions, starting a discussion and really starting to oppose solutions or offer solutions in that. So does that give you enough information?
It does, yeah. I just love what you're doing, by the way. I just absolutely love it. So that sounds like it covers quite a broad range of situations. Can you maybe give us some examples of places where this kind of like this idea, this new way of doing things can be applied?
Absolutely.
Well, originally we started the original intention of aiming this at schools because we were obviously both from an educational background. We were both teachers for many years, and we were in pastoral care and leadership. And the original plan was to drive a change in organisations in schools, primary schools, secondary schools, colleges. As we started to look at the feedback and the responses from various people around the book, we actually found that it was a wider, a broader area of impact. So anywhere where there is a relationship between a learner and a facilitator, and we ended up using the word facilitator because obviously if you take something like yoga, you might call yourself a yoga facilitator, or if you're a retreat, you might call yourself a retreat facilitator. And we found the word teacher perhaps didn't apply to everybody. So what we found was that the breadth of the breadth of people providing a learning environment or within a learning environment was across a range of different areas. Schools, it could be in a place of work, it could be, as we said, at a retreat, it could be a one-to-one class, it could be a counselling session. And therefore, we kind of landed at the point where we thought, right, the experience of both the learner and the provider, the facilitator, needs to be embodied. They'd need to be present in their body, present and responding to how their body was presenting itself, the emotions that were presenting themselves, the kind of somatic experience that they were that they were reading whilst they were in the session with the person.
Yeah, so is that a bit like Kay mentioned asking questions? Is that kind of like internally asking yourself questions based on what you're, as you just said, somatically feeling in your body, the kind of emotions that are coming up for you? Can you maybe describe, just what it might be like for somebody to use what's in the book in a setting? What might they be doing differently to what they normally do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's such a complete shift from how we facilitate, teach and learn. It's almost like you do the opposite. So part of the book involves embodied education, does involve the mind and metacognition, thinking about your thinking and critical thinking. We don't throw out the body. However, what we have done is we've blended into the learning and the inquiry, the questions, and show me what your body feels about that, and tell me what sensations in your body, how you're reacting to this content. So we're blending kind of instinct and intuition into the learning environment. And again, there are suggestions within the book, there are some somatic practices. But the key question is, what does your mind say? What does your intuition say? What does your wise mind say? What does your heart say? What does your gut say? And can you show me what it's telling you, whether that be in a picture, creatively, in a movement, in a sound, in a verbal message? So it's a huge topic, but it's blending. Embodied education blends creatively metacognition, intuition and instinct.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So you mentioned there the wise mind. Can I just ask about that? What's different to the mind?
The wise mind, for me, is my own path that brought me to this is, obviously I've been on the spiritual path my whole life. So I was very much immersed in mindfulness, the concept of the observer mind. And I think there's a great worth in the slowing down the chatter of the mind, so the logical mind, to observe your thoughts. So that's the wise mind for me. However, when I kind of diverged, took a different path from traditional mindfulness and spirituality, for me that was still quite dissociated and disembodied. So I then bring the wise mind in and through the body. And so I'm saying, now take that wise mind, that observer's mind, into your heart. Tell me what you see, feel and know there. And so I'm taking the intuitive mind in and through the body, which is part of my other work and writing. So the wise mind for me is beyond just the observer, the Buddha mind, the Christ consciousness, whatever you want to call that. It's actually your intuition that can be the observer that can be taken in through the body as well. And that's where we blend intuition and instinct within embodied education.
And also,
sorry, go on, Dan.
Thank you. I was also going to say, in a kind of really kind of watered down practical example, if you imagine being sat in a classroom at school and you're taught something, and you're taught maybe a definition or a concept, and the reason you're taught that is because it's important knowledge for an exam, or it's important knowledge that you'll need to use later on. And that is very much a mind. It's very much a factual recall. It has nothing to do with being aware of how you feel about it, what that information, where does that information sit within other people's views? What does that information, where does that information sit within the world, within the bigger sphere of things? And I think definitely now, but when we first started off, that was the focus with the embodied education, was, we wanted students to be not necessarily questioning what they were being taught, but to think about, okay, where does this concept come from? Who has actually created this? Why does it exist? How has it come into fruition? Is it still relevant these days? And to actually become part of the learning process, not just, here is a fact, you must remember it for an exam. Here is a piece of information. Now let's kind of discuss it. Let's pull it apart. How does it make you feel? Do you think other people might feel about this? Is it still relevant today? And that's it. That's embodied. That's, you know, being present in the room, being present in your body, responding to the reactions that it creates for you.
Yeah, because what I'm getting from this is it's kind of taking things deeper and at the same time sort of expanding things. That's kind of what I'm getting, sort of a sense of opening almost that maybe hasn't existed previously in these spaces. I mean, I think a lot of spaces, certainly for me, do feel quite shut down, and you can get a sense that the person that's, you know, teaching, or as you say, facilitating, isn't really fully there with you. And actually that sometimes can feel unsafe to me. I mean, I've got a lot of trauma, so, you know, I accept that partially it will be that. But if somebody isn't kind of open to whatever's happening within the space and present with it, able to be present with it, I sometimes you just get like a sense that something's quite off. So what would you say kind of made you want to write this book? Were you getting senses like that within spaces that you've been in? I'm just curious really where it all began, you know, what kind of led you to the moment where presumably you both had a conversation and said, let's write a book about it. Can you maybe kind of give us a bit of background as to how it came about? What kind of made you decide to write a book about doing things so differently?
Yeah, it was exactly that, trauma-informed facilitation. So when I left teaching and went kind of immersed in I'm a trained counsellor as well, but also went on to the wellbeing path and then the spiritual path, I was seeing some really unsafe practices going on in spiritual spaces. So this is a workbook, a manual that will support safe facilitation, trauma-informed, neurodivergent friendly facilitation in spiritual and wellbeing spaces, which are often the most, from my experience, the most disembodied spaces that I've actually moved into. So the fire came through me that yes, the education system is incredibly disembodied, and we are both from that background, but also I was seeing where alternative learning spaces were happening. So even spaces where we were being taught to be in our bodies were disembodied, mindfulness spaces. And I felt very passionately that I wanted to create or offer a paradigm of safe space that was embodied, but embodied in a way where trauma and the trauma response is recognized and contained. And so the very backbone of the book is trauma-informed facilitation and neurodivergent facilitation. So, and that came from my own trauma experiences, but also from learning to resolve trauma and being trained in somatics and so on. And so that then brought me to a conversation with Dan, who's obviously been on the journey with me, and saying, gosh, let's now talk about what's going on in education. Is this safe? Is this a safe space to learn? And from that, we saw how this was a holistic model, as Dan said at the beginning, for any space where learning takes place.
And I think also to add to that, it's not obviously just about facilitation. Obviously, facilitation makes you feel safe and it allows you to be open and honest and express your emotions and be present and embodied. But I think also, if I reflect on it in terms of working in a school, if you are, and I think you used the word earlier, shutting down. If you're shutting down a student's or a learner's ability to think and to question and to self-regulate and to expand, I think then you are creating a human being that later on doesn't have that set of skills and doesn't question things later on in their life, or potentially doesn't question it because the authority figures, the educationists, the teachers, other organizations, they have told them how it is and they haven't given those opportunities to explore how it made them feel. If I can give you anecdotally an example, there was an assembly about an event that was happening in the world, and the purpose of the assembly was to tell the students to follow a particular source or narrative that was talking about this world event. One of the students at the end of the assembly came and said to me, well, I'm not going to trust that source because they covered up for that person, or they did this. So this student was already aware that the provider of this media story had done unethical things, and therefore they didn't trust them. But they were being told by teachers and in assembly that they should trust them, and that was the source that they should be following in relation to this world event. And there was this like dissonance between, hang on a minute, I know that this is supposed to be a source that I'm supposed to trust, and I'm being told by authority figures that I should trust this, but my body is saying, I know something different about this news source, and I don't trust them for these reasons. And yet they didn't have that, I mean, they expressed it to me, but they didn't have that that ability to be able to express it in an open forum and say, well, should we be trusting this? And therefore, you know, I said to them, well, you know, in that scenario, I said to them, you go with your gut instinct, you know. And, you know, I thought that's the kind of thing, they'll take that away and they will question it. But in other scenarios, they would have been shut down and not had that freedom to explore that alternative view or that concern.
Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being so safe that instinctively that person knew that they could come to you, because it sounds like, without, you know, unconsciously, I'm sure it wasn't deliberate, but almost like people were, you know, being taught to almost ignore their intuition and just accept a blanket idea rather than, as you said, you know, kind of investigating it and thinking about it a bit deeper for yourself. Quite worrying, really, that happens in spaces, particularly if it's with children.
And I don't think it's, you know, it's not deliberate. It's not, people aren't saying, right, how can we, you know, brainwash you? But I think it's that rhetoric, it's the rhetoric that people are taught. And it's about, you know, something might have worked for particular people or a particular group of people, and it might have worked 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But the thing is it still relevant now? And does it still support the individuals you have, or the individual that you have in front of you? And I think that's what being embodied is. It's about being aware of all of the people who you are facilitating for, you know, the backgrounds, what do they need, where have they come from, and then, you know, creating a space, creating learning, you know, delivering, facilitating that is then supporting them, not just a kind of, you know, one glove fits everybody, or, you know, or one approach fits everybody.
Yeah, can I add, Luna, also, so I had that experience as a head of year, but then as I moved into facilitation in terms of somatics and shamanic practitioner and one-to-one coaching, I was finding I was receiving a lot of clients that came to me post ayahuasca, post trips with indigenous shamanic shamans, or trips that to Peru, where they've been opened unsafely in their nervous system and in their psyche, and then they were coming back, and I was having to, and not having to, but they were asking me to support them to not only integrate but deal with the trauma that came up in that plant ceremony, or in the kind of really depth shamanic work that they'd been doing. And so I have seen that firsthand and work with people to support integration and to process trauma that has come up in spiritual areas because of unsafe, disembodied facilitation. So we're coming at it from two angles: traditional educational structures, but also well-being and spiritual circles.
Yeah, thank you. I have heard some real horror stories actually from spaces. It does seem to be particularly with plant medicine, which I don't know why, but it does seem to be particularly with that. I've heard horror stories, and, you know, it's certainly put me off. I wouldn't want to go there with somebody that was, you know, cut off or shut down in any way. So I think it's so important what you're doing, because it is kind of, as you say, blending it all and making it so that it can be used in any of these places that it's necessary. And how interesting that you've both had people come to you almost to kind of be the remedy to what's gone on, and kind of, do you think that maybe has also been partially why you wrote the book, because you were seeing it yourselves, but also people were sort of starting to come to you almost needing kind of mopping up after a bit of a mess?
Yeah, I think in my experience, I think students were approaching me, but I think subconsciously it was happening because I was embodied, and I think I was holding embodied space for the students. I remember a student walking down the corridor past my room once, and they stuck their head around the door. It was break time or lunchtime. And I remember them saying, "Oh, I feel really safe in your room." And I remember thinking, gosh, off the cuff, that was such a really weird, odd thing to say. But then because I was, because I'd spoken with Kay, and because I was, aware of other, somatics and, being embodied, I thought, oh, actually, what this student is saying is that your room makes my nervous system feel safe. Or, I feel that my nervous system has relaxed in this space. Now, if you'd gone back kind of 2, 3, maybe, even a year and a half ago, I would have just taken it. It was just a comment that this student was making. But because, my eyes were opened and I was aware of the nervous system and, and how it presents itself and how different people respond, I could see it that actually it was bigger than the comment and the words that the student was saying. So I think being aware of it and trying to facilitate an embodied way, I think has attracted students and staff as well, that then feel safe and feel heard and feel they can express themselves and be embodied in their own rights. It's not, but earlier when we were talking, I was thinking this isn't just a book about facilitation. It's not just for teachers. It's about a set of practices and approaches that facilitators can use, but then that actually allows the person participating to then be embodied, which I think then gives them strength, gives them a set of skills and knowledge to then take that into their life.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? Because if people become more embodied, that's not just within the spaces that people are creating. As you say, it's actually a set of life skills, isn't it?
You can't. Yeah, sorry, Luna, go on.
No, go on, it's okay.
You can't facilitate a safe space until you can't fake it. You can't pick up a book and learn the method. It's a felt sense. So the facilitator, as we say in the book, it needs to be doing their own nervous system practices, and I'm going to use the inverted commas, work, so that they are able to co-regulate with those in the space. And co-regulation is a physiological state. It's not behavioral focused. It's not a management technique, although it does support group management. It is a felt sense of safety that you cultivate in yourself as the practitioner. You then ooze safety. That's how I describe it. You ooze safety within the space and create a container of energy that is regulated. So it is of the highest good and well-being of all in organizations and communities if embodied education is actually the paradigm that is taken and embedded.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think, the nervous system is such a biggie. It's what makes us human, isn't it? But I know myself, because mine's often dysregulated. If you can't kind of regulate it, you don't feel quite safe within yourself. And I do think, just like you've had people coming to you because they can, Dan was saying, it's almost like a subconscious thing, isn't it? They kind of can sense that you are safe and that you are regulating your nervous system. People can kind of tell that, can't they, on an intuitive level? Yeah. And instinctively know when a person is more regulated. Isn't there a thing where, I don't know if you know about this, but I heard that babies, when they're born, kind of don't know what the word is, harmonize their nervous system with their mothers, or their caregivers.
It happens in utero, as well.
Yeah, does it, right? Gosh. So the nervous system, being embodied and having your nervous system regulated is so far reaching, isn't it?
Yeah.
And could be just so transformative for everybody if they take this approach. So I know that you mentioned something about neurodiversity as well, and it kind of, you know, does include that. Just how inclusive is the book? Is it sort of can be used in all different backgrounds, cultures, types of neurology? How inclusive is it?
Yeah, as inclusive as the work and the practices that we have undertaken, that we will inevitably probably have blind spots and things we've missed, because we welcome feedback if we've missed anything. But it is definitely neurodivergent friendly, and it comes at it inclusivity from the point of view of the leadership, leading by example, do as I do. We mentioned in the book is like the mantra, do as I do. And then also the policies and the procedures, the building itself, making that inclusive and sensory friendly for neurodivergent individuals. And the content as well. We talk about the content that is facilitated, looking at we cover everything, kind of, is it non-patriarchal, do an audit around decolonializing, and you know, really in terms of the content is inclusive as well. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously, let me just think 1 minute. For me, the content in the book isn't a script of what to do, and I think that's perhaps how traditional training and you know, help guides and instruction is given. You know, if you do this, you'll have this response. Because this is about embodiment and being in the body and responding to people a kind of emotional somatic level, I think that kind of transcends all the different needs of everybody. So, for example, you know, if you do have a disabled person or a neurodivergent person or a person who's upset or traumatized, being embodied and responding to their requirements and their needs and their need for embodiment and safety is going to be different for each of those people, but it still comes down to being regulated yourself, understanding the other person, being present for the other person, listening to them, and you know, providing support if needed, or you know, just being there and witnessing what they need. So there are practices in there, but they are kind of physical embodiment practices which can be applied to many different situations, many different institutions, different facilitators, you know, different kind of makeups for people and people with different requirements and needs.
The key for me is we can't tell what each group of individuals need. So really, within your community, whether it be a school, a spiritual community or wellness area, facilitate the view, or you sit down to facilitate a group or hold a space, a circle. You ask the individuals what would make that space safe for them, and then you build the structure and the content around their voice. So we are facilitating discussion, but actually we can't tell what everybody needs. You have to ask each group or community that you're in. And that's what I think is missing. You know, that sense of belonging, we co-create and the communities and the spaces together, and each is going to be different as each group of individual comes together.
Yeah, that's different. I like that. I don't think I've ever been asked, you know, what would make you feel safe.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been quite fortunate in most of the spiritual places I've been. You know, I have felt safe and I've been held, and there's been some sort of structure that kind of aids that, but I've never been asked, you know, what would make you feel safe. That's really good. I like that a lot. So can we talk a little bit about, because you mentioned buildings and kind of making them inclusive for people and part of this. Can you talk about what that might look like, what that means?
Yeah, so part of my other work is I work with a community-based an interest company called Neurodiverse Connection UK. And part of the work that we do in that is sensory audits of buildings. So the sensory environment are the acoustics, the fabrics, the colours, the sounds, the smells. That is, so the building itself, as well as access, and, you know, making the doorways have kind of, you know, inclusion access for wheelchair users, and are the corridors big enough, and so on, and toilets. The sensory environment is a big part of particularly neurodivergent friendly and safe spaces in that sense. When we facilitated informally views via a survey in writing this book, the sensory environment and the trauma that people had from their schooling because of that was really big, wasn't it? Yeah. So for us, talking about the building and inclusion in that sense is part of what is embodied and safe facilitation.
Yeah, I mean, again, anecdotally, simple things like the corridors in a lot of schools are kind of a baby powder blue, and you know, when you kind of look at the psychology behind colours, blue, baby powder blue isn't necessarily the most embodied colour. The reason why it was painted in a lot of schools is because it actually detracts people from writing on it. But, you know, is that the purpose of the colour, to detract people from writing on it? You know, there are other colours that make people feel safe. There's other colours that make people feel inspired, you know, motivated. So if you kind of really spent a lot of time looking at, you could colour code the classrooms or the walls and the corridors to, you know, elicit more positive responses. A lot of schools have got this now, but they have areas where different students can go, where there may be like a restroom where it's quieter. You know, lighting is more subdued. There's maybe you know, comfy seats to sit on and stuff like that. And you think that's fine, but that kind of comes at a crisis point when somebody needs it. Why is that not embedded across classrooms? You know, why do we have to have a desk with a chair behind it and everybody has to sit facing the front? Is there not scope to have a more informal layout, or a classroom where you can sit at a desk, but you can move the desk and angle the desk, and the chair, you know, is perhaps more comfortable, and you can sit at the back if you want to, or move away from a window. And it's that kind of awareness of sensory needs of the individual at that point, because it can change from day to day, especially, you know, with teenagers. You know, they can come in on the morning and they know they need to sit by the door, but, you know, second period, an hour later, they want to be near the window, or, you know, they want to be with their friends. So it's having that ability to adapt, rather than, no, this is where you sit, you must face the front of the classroom, and you sit there, and you sit there every single day for the hour and you don't move. And that's, you know, I don't actually know what that's teaching individuals, but it's not embodied, and it's not providing, you know, for some students it works, but for the majority of students, it doesn't provide anything additional other than just a place to sit.
And for neurodivergent individuals, it's actually it's incredibly dysregulating for the nervous system to not be able to move, stim, sound. Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of trauma going on from the environment and the procedures on a day-to-day basis in schools, stored trauma.
Yeah, just even listening to you, I was kind of transported back to school, and I'm autistic, and so is my son, and we both had a terrible time at school. And yes, some of the things that you were just mentioning then, it was coming back to me, and I actually honestly felt sick just from the memory of it. So if you can just even imagine what that must have been doing, you know, when I was actually there, if all these years later I can still feel sick just at the thought of, like you were saying, the powder blue walls, and it, for me, it was the smells and the lights and the noise. Everything was just completely overwhelming. It's good what Dan was saying, that there are these quieter spaces now with, you know, dim lights, but as you were saying, Dan, it shouldn't be left to a crisis. It should just be kind of, you know, as what you're both trying to introduce, kind of thought out and across the board, really, shouldn't it? Just available to people.
And the irony about that is that the students that perhaps don't require that space are actually trying to get in there. So you know, if I'd say to you about the library probably has 40 to 60 students in there at break times and lunch times. A lot of them are neurodiverse, a lot of them are highly anxious. They want a safe space where, you know, they're kind of listened to and respected. But other students want to come into the library, and there's always this kind of, you know, gaggle of other students that are trying to get in because they want to be part of the atmosphere. They want to be part of that group because it is safe, and it's, you know, it's a community, and they're all respected. So, you know, all students want access to that. All students, you know, need access to that space. But as I said, it comes to kind of crisis point, or, you know, only for particular individuals that can access it. But I think everybody would benefit from it. Everybody will benefit
from neurodivergent friendly spaces. And by that, I'm not only talking about the sensory environment, so the smells, the sounds, the temperatures. I'm also talking about the social processing and the boundaries and the support around communication and interactions, and how we regulate and speak to each other within those spaces. So it's actually for the benefit, as I go back to embodied education, is for the well-being and the highest benefit of all nervous systems, and regardless of neurotype. I absolutely know that is true.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I can really sense it, and although I'm neurodiverse, so of course that's kind of my example, is that's kind of my benchmark. I still think that everybody in the world, whether neurodiverse or not, is sensitive in some way. We've all got our own sensitive, all got individual needs around that. So I just really like that the book is kind of helping people to explore that and then to put it into place. That's really good. So can you tell me a little bit about what it was like to write the book together? Because writing a book is quite a ride anyway. I'm writing one. I've just started writing one, so I kind of know that it can be not as simple as it might seem. When somebody buys the book, that's all they get to see, but behind the scenes there's a lot more goes on, and you've written it together. So can you maybe tell us a little bit about what that was like to kind of write it together, and how long it's taken? And I heard you mention that you'd done some surveys and got feedback, which I think is absolutely brilliant. So can you maybe talk a bit about the process?
You want me to? Yeah.
Well, I'll just jump in quickly and say it was interesting because it did evolve. I think we approached it very much like a research task. We sent out a questionnaire. We asked people to respond and talk about their experiences in school, and that was kind of the basis for the evidence of the requirement for embodied education. So I can't remember the exact statistics off the top of my head, but something like so many percentage of students had an issue around the toilet in school, and it caused a traumatic response in childhood, and later on in life still caused issues around the toilet, you know, going on long journeys, flying away on holiday, being on public transport, you know, they had an issue around the toilet, and that is kind of exacerbated from the fact that at school toilet wasn't allowed, or it had to be on certain times, or it wasn't respected, and things like that. So we started out as a research project to get the evidence to prove this. And I think what actually happened was we knew deep down that we didn't need to prove that there were these problems in school, and a kind of a negligence towards the body and the somatics. They weren't being embraced. They weren't being recognised by facilitators. So then we moved to a more holistic way that we could embody education. And then I suppose the third part was that actually this isn't just in schools, this is across all organisations. This is facilitation, retreats, etc., businesses, charities, and so on. So that was kind of like how the book evolved. And I think Kay will probably talk about the writing experience.
Yeah. So the first thing I have to say, the research isn't research as such, as in we did it in a way that would be classed as an academic research piece. We sent out an informal survey to receive informal views, and They just validated our instinct. So I'm autistic. Our children are neurodivergent. And I'm a great believer in the neurodiversity model, that all neurotypes, we're all neurodiverse, regardless of our neurotype. Our neuro, kind of how we are in our mind is not binary. You know, we're all in a neurodiversity, we're all different. So when we actually wrote it and we got the statistics in, which is about 2 years ago now, the data in, we set off writing, and it was going to be about schools. And I wrote the core background from a therapeutic angle, counselling angle, coaching angle. I was very much immersed in wellbeing retreats. And then, so I wrote like the skeleton and then hand it over to Dan. And Dan just went, as you've written it now, it's like, that is not school, and school cannot morph into this. So I went, oh, well, we can't write for schools. We're just going to write for spiritual wellbeing communities. And that was maybe last April.
Yeah.
And then I'd say post-COVID, because of the crisis we're seeing in education and in mental health services, some of my work is with CAMS, it's been a shock in how just within 6 months, so coming up to the winter, how the education system's really in such a crisis that suddenly we can see that they're ready and open to it. So we went back to writing for a massive audience, including schools, and really put the foot on the accelerator around February this year. And it's now gone to edit, and it will be scheduled for publication in September.
And yeah, just to chip in there about the writing process, is that, you know, Kay said she wrote it from her experience and point of view, working in wellbeing. And I knew that you can't just, writing a book and sharing content isn't just about saying how you want things to be. You have to be able to engage people, readers. You have to be able to explain it to them. And you've got to remember that for some people, the idea of being aware of your body, or, you know, being embodied, is completely abstract and alien. And you've got to walk through the steps of how do you get to that. You know, how will I know that I am embodied? You know, what am I looking for? Is it a tingling in my big toe or something? And, you know, a lot of people, they're not aware of what embodied is, and they're so used to not listening to their body or overriding it, that it's a completely abstract concept. So I felt that what we needed to put in there was steps and stages and kind of, well, steps, I'll call it, of this is where you want to be, this is where we want to get to, but, you know, this is how you begin to work towards that. This is the kind of things you want to start looking for. And a lot of the chapters have kind of, I won't say audit because that's far too clinical, but, you know, they've got kind of reviews and kind of reflective pieces where they actually get you to sit down, you know, and think about a time when you were at school or work or in a relationship and something that happened, and how did you feel, and how did you know you felt like that? Where did you feel it in your body? What does that tell you? What is that intuition now telling you for the future? How do you use it? And actually getting you to spend time reflecting on your own body and your own nervous system, and how it supports you and how it tells you what you already know.
Yeah, because I think society as a whole, as you say, it's alien to even think about what embodiment is, and possibly wouldn't have even heard the word, never mind thought about it. And there's so many things like adverts and the media really kind of encourage disembodiment, I think. You know, they encourage people to drink, for example, or to eat badly, or just to do things that kind of take you out of, you know, kind of, for example, alcohol and eating badly kind of shut down the body's sensations, really. It kind of stops that. So we're living in a world that is almost the opposite of what you're kind of sharing in this book. So I guess there might be a little kind of bedding in process with this, but how do you think it's going to be received in various settings, you know, so not just in schools, but, you know, as Kay has talked about, the wellbeing areas and holistic places? how do you think it's going to be received?
Well, I sent it to, it's been reviewed a few times, and one person I sent it to, got some really good feedback about titrating and again, giving people really small steps to take. I think there'll be various responses. I'm not entirely sure, like we said, that people necessarily understand it immediately, but there is a curiosity because the system is not working. So there's an openness, I think, to, well, we've got to try something different. So although it may be, there might be, we don't entirely understand it, I think there is an openness. And also because it's got steps to try and discussion questions, you can read Embodied Education and come at it very logically and through the mind first. And then I think there will be a need for training for us to go in and actually talk it through and demonstrate some of the practices and some of the things we're talking about. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the book's not going to change things overnight, and I think it's a kind of catalyst or a call to action for people. So, you know, the structures are so regimented and so established that to change them, you know, in a year or a couple of years, I think is very difficult. But if people start reading the book and start facilitating a different way, then it has a trickle down effect. Obviously, one, the facilitation is improved and embodied, but also the people on the courses, you know, the learners, if you like, they start to be able to express themselves, to listen to their own intuition, to become embodied. They then take that out into the world, and then that's reflected back with other people that they meet and so on. And I think I mean, it's not, you know, in terms of education, etc., it's not going to change things overnight because, you know, as I've already said, the structures are in place. They serve a particular purpose. And, you know, it would be like trying to change a ship round whilst it's in direction. It takes a while to spin it round. But it's just giving people a different way of thinking and empowering them to think differently. And just, I suppose, generally, in basic terms, coming back into the body. So much of our life now is spent in our brains, and we're kind of thinking through problems, and I can solve a problem by thinking about it. And if I think about it hard enough and long enough and deep enough, then I can solve it and make myself better. And that's a really kind of tiring and you know, kind of damaging way to live, because if I think hard enough, I can cure myself, or I think hard enough, I'll do this. And actually, the body is where people need to come back into. Humans need to come back into the body, because the intuition, the nervous system, the somatic system knows it keeps you safe. It's been trained to keep you safe, you know, historically for years and years. So in a nutshell, if you can bring people back into their body, and they can then speak with truth and speak with honesty about how they really feel, how their body's, you know, really reacting, then obviously that makes people more authentic, and therefore I think that's a better experience for everybody.
And I would just like to say there's no learning without the body. We learn in the parasympathetic nervous system. That's where we're calm and curious and creative and innovative. And so regulating the nervous system, coming into parasympathetic, so out of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, into calm, that's where healing the patriarchy, if I use the name of your podcast, will happen. That's where we can access love in its embodied sense, and start to co-regulate and harmonize. Why we're not in that, there's many reasons. We could talk about the agenda and so on, but for now, if we really want to support future generations, then we have to look at nervous system well-being, health, and educate from that place of parasympathetic.
I agree. I didn't know that about the parasympathetic nervous system. Thank you. So are you able to kind of explain just very simply why that is how we learn.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Would that be okay?
Yeah, so my training, my mentor, although I'm not formally trained as a practitioner in somatic experiencing, my mentor, Irene Ryan, the kind of education I received was by the polyvagal theory, Stephen Porges. And he says as humans, we have two portions of our nervous system, parasympathetic and sympathetic. Parasympathetic ventral vagal, which is the place where we're calm and connected and present and curious and so on, is where we're meant to live. But because we live in so much anxiety and we're fed by our media channels, and you must revise for your exams, and that hard kind of push, anything that is too fast, too soon, too quickly creates that trauma, that stress response, the fight flight, and out of that our calm and curious mind is offline and we're just in survival. And the parasympathetic also has what's called the dorsal vagal branch, which is the shutdown, the freeze. And so many of us are in functional freezes where we have a lot of fight flight, but we also are immobilized and frozen, and that's where we see a lot of autoimmune and illnesses. So it's a huge piece of education. It is in the book. We simplify, it is the foundation of the book, nervous system education. And we do talk about that. But that, from my humble opinion, I believe should be core education within mental health services, but also within educational student teachers and leadership kind of training. It's not there yet, but it is coming. So the parasympathetic is not the predominant nervous system state we see on the planet at the moment. And patriarchy depends on us being in fight flight. However, the most revolutionary and spiritual practice you can do is to work with your nervous system, I believe. And within, just to go back to the spiritual circles as well, where you say we're not really taught embodiment, you said that earlier, Luna, people go because they're seeking sensation into these spiritual spaces, and they are traumatized because the embodied practices that are happening, Kundalini is a good example, is too fast, too soon, too quickly. And that puts them into fight, flight, or freeze, functional freeze. So what humans are humans wherever they are. It doesn't matter whether they're in a business or in a charity or in a school or in a yoga class. Our nervous systems are still the same. The facilitator needs to understand capacity, their own capacity, what they can hold, and be able to sense and regulate and know and read the space of the people who are within it, and create that container of safety and containment, it's called. Again, it's all in the book. So it's a big topic. We could have spent the whole hour on it, but I hope that answers your question.
It does, and thank you, because that was really helpful, and I've actually learned something for me, so thank you. I'm definitely going to get the book because I need it, and I hope that lots and lots of people get your book. So can you just tell us, I know it's coming out in September, but is there a way for people to pre-order it if they want to?
Yeah, it's pre-orderable now on the Girl God website. So www.thegirlgod.com. You can pre-order it there. It's also on my website. There's a button to pre-order. But Girl God are the publishers, and yeah, you can pre-order it there now.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I'll definitely be pre-ordering it. So thank you. I think we're coming to the end of our time together now, but I just want to give you the opportunity to say anything else that you want to say before kind of we close.
I would say thanks for your time and for listening to us, and allowing us to share our vision and share a different approach to education and learning.
And I want to say one of the best feedback I received on one of the draft copies was, I don't know how I'd feel being a practitioner who really heart and soul was into this paradigm, but the rest of the people in my school or organisation or community weren't. And they said, you need to write to that. So we did. And we said, the ripple of one regulated nervous system can cause a tsunami of change. I didn't actually say it like that, but that's what I believe. One person who comes into safety within their own embodiment oozes, it's called limbic resonance, oozes safety, and it ripples through. The children, as Dan said, he's oozing limbic safety. So the children are coming to him because he's still in the classroom and saying, it feels safe in here. I can speak to you honestly. People come to me post ayahuasca and are asking me, help me with this because I'm opened. It's been too much too soon, too quickly. So my answer is, to anybody who feels lonely, one, I'm going to open up a Facebook group called Embodied Education to network with like-minded people. So that will be part of the offering within the book, a free space to share. But also know that you're not alone. There are other people there, and just keep your eyes internally and working with your own embodied safety, because you become a magnet. And people are just drawn to that sense of feeling that they have presence given to them, and that you can contain and hold their stories, but also their emotions. And in leadership, get curious. People are interested. They want to know, what are you doing differently? And it starts the discussion. So one person really can change the organization just by being in their wholeness. And I really wanted to end by saying that, because it does seem overwhelming, because it's so different to what we hear in the world and the predominant paradigm. But don't underestimate the change of embodiment, just singularly on your own path.
Yeah, thank you. What a fitting way to end. Thank you so much. And thank you to both of you for writing the book, for being how you are in the world, and for coming on my show. I honestly feel so honoured to have had you here. I'm really, really grateful to you for coming on to talk to us all about it. Can you just before I say bye to everybody, do you have any social media or any websites that you want to share? I know you've shared Girl God books where people can pre-order, but if people want to kind of just follow you in general kind of thing and find out more about what you're doing, do you want to share maybe websites or social media?
Yeah, the first coming together in this project, it will be via the Embodied Education Facebook group. So that's kind of where this combined project social media will be taking place, and that will be accessible through the book. It's part of what is offered with the book. And then my website is www.klouisealdred.com. And social media is all Louise Aldred. So that we're kind of, it's been a branched off my social media, if that makes sense, but the combined project together is Embodied Education, the Facebook group.
Okay, that's great. And Dan, do you want to share anything for how people can get in touch if they want to, or do you not want to?
No, I only have my social medias for technology and computing, so, so it's under a different name. I mean, people, yeah, I mean, I'd probably say no. I'd probably say go through Embodied Education, because that's where I'd pick up content and questions and discussion related to that. My other social media is for computing and programming and coding, which, it's a whole different podcast.
It certainly is. I just wanted to check that before we ended. So thank you both so much. And honestly, I am just in awe of what you've done with this book, and I know it's going to do great things in the world. So thank you both. And to all the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in and listening, and I will see you next time. Thank you and bye.